I'm Costa Vavagiakis. I'm an artist and instructor at the Art Students League of New York. This is a 3-hour portrait drawing demonstration for one of my drawing classes at the League. This demonstration is an execution of a portrait drawing, a bust, done in one of my favorite mediums, graphite and white chalk on toned paper. This technique allows for quicker results than working on white paper. I plan the composition assessing the major shapes. I use a free-flowing, open-ended, enveloping line to establish the relationships of the large shapes, the relationships of the positive and negative shape. When I feel comfortable with the placement, in this case fairly early, I proceed to identify the mass of the head, neck, and shoulder girdle. Since time is of essence, since I'm showing a technique using linear hatching and cross-hatching, I prefer to use a graphite that doesn't require sharpening. I am using an HB 0.9 mechanical pencil for the darks and the lower halftones or darker lights, and a white chalk pencil for the highlights and higher halftones or lighter lights. Since the foundation of our drawings are the large shapes and big masses, I like using a 0.9 over a 0.7 or 0.5 because the lead barrel is broader. It allows me to work more generally and broadly. I use a white pencil, the softest white charcoal available, like the Generals or Pitt brands. I prefer the softest white chalk pencil because of its flexibility, tonal range towards light, and its reversibility. This allows me to make the changes, adjustments, the calibrations necessary to refine the drawing as I go. In the beginning and throughout, I like holding the pencil on the side, using my wrists so that I can cover ground from top to bottom, side to side, and not have my palm smudging the paper. I also sharpen my white pencils to a nice long honed tapered cone and shave off the wood at the ends. This allows me to hold it at a 45-degree angle, almost parallel to the paper, again, to move around the paper with ease. I use cross-hatching marks along and around the light form, starting from the lightest part, the highlight, and arcing my lines to enforce the volumetric appearance of the light forms. Just as I'm doing with the darks in layers, lightening as I go, always working from the lightest down. Going back and forth from dark to light, traveling from point to point, place to place, not stopping too long at any one place. Always traveling in sequence, from landmark to landmark, making adjustments, corrections along the way, allowing the fact that I'm getting more informed the longer I experience my subject to help refine the drawing. After preliminary placement of the features, I zero in on a focal point, a place to refer to, a home base to travel from and to. This reference point allows a landmark to start the navigation process to measure the features and the space between the features. It is usually one of the eye sockets or nose. In this case, the base of the nose is where I start from. The technique I use is really an old one because years ago in the Renaissance you had from the beginning of the Renaissance you had a linear approach to drawing where they created a way of hatching to create the shadows so that the lights can come out, starting with Signorelli and Leonardo. That came along with the one-point perspective. And then towards the late 18th century, line gave way to tone. So you got, and the instruments, materials became more the Conti crayon, the softer tones that they were using, and also in the ateliers and the manuals, the teaching manuals became more tonal. But the drawings I do usually, they become tone, but over a layered system of hatching and cross-hatching. I do it because I want to create a sense of volume and value control. I stretch my values out slowly so that it builds more gradually, so that I get a more detailed representation of the form. And so I don't want to quickly, that's why I don't want to use tone too quickly, because it doesn't have the tonal variables. So basically, the hatching technique allows me to actually stretch out the value scale from 2 to 5 to 10 to 20 into the hundreds. I use this stroke always starting where the light ends and the shadow begins. I use a tactile definition for this place and call it the crest shadow. I will always start my shading and keep working throughout my drawing there, since it is a dominant plane break away from the light. It is always the darkest tone of the form. There is a symbiotic relationship established between artist and model, between viewer and viewed. And hopefully, I keep the channels open so that an emotional, expressive, along with a realistic image comes forth. I keep going in this manner, no matter if I'm doing a 3-hour, 3-day, or 3-week drawing. Hatching, cross-hatching, and layering. The marks start blending together, allowing the forms to emerge in order to create a realistic representation on who I'm observing. I start nailing down the forms using open-ended, overlapping hatching lines. Using a 45-degree hatching line from top right to bottom left for the darks. This is easiest on a wrist for right-handers. Left-handers work from top left to bottom right. Leonardo's drawings are examples of left-handed strokes, and Raphael's drawings are examples of right-handed strokes. I want to use what is easiest on my wrist, since I am going to use the stroke throughout the drawing to shade, mass, and unify the drawing. These hatching strokes work well for the darks because they emphasize the flat appearance of the darks. I use these strokes always starting where the light ends and the shadow begins. I always go back home to the reference point and set to go out to travel again and again. This approach allows me to be vigilant of the big picture, the world view, the gestalt, in order to have all the elements in proper relation, in proportion. my work is more about like the form as a sculptural entity. But basically, with my work, particularly the paintings, you know, they're really, when you think about it, they're painting equivalents of sculpture. That's what it is for me. So it's really not, you know, it's just a technique for an end, what particular ends you want. That's what it is. And that's why I have developed this technique, is basically I wanted to build these images that were like experiencing the sculpture. And it goes way back from the early initiation. That's what I do. And that technique is, if it's a tonal technique, it's more about light and atmosphere. You know, and there's a beauty to that. But to me, it's not totally what I want to say. I want to say volume and form and tactile.